Statistics South Africa has delivered the worst unemployment numbers since the first quarterly labour survey was conducted back in 2008. Unemployment is now at 34.9%, and the expanded definition, which, as you know, includes discouraged work seekers, is now at a shocking 46.6%. The continued lockdown restrictions, things like load shedding and the July riots, leading to the shedding of about 660,000 jobs in the period under review. With that in mind, let's bring in our guests. Ayanda Kota is the founder and spokesperson for the Unemployed People's Movement. Also joining this conversation is Youth Capital Network Mobiliser, Lethiwe Nkosi. To both our guests, always a pleasure. Thanks very much indeed for making time. Lethiwe, perhaps I can begin with your opening remarks. You know, the unemployment level is at a new high, but the issues underpinning the crisis are ancient old. Why is that?
I think they're ancient old because whenever we think about youth unemployment in particular, we think about it as a moment in time issue, right? The moment when a young person knocks on doors, submits CVs, tries to find work experience, tries to find their first job. When in truth, the issue actually runs as deep as when a young person is at school and the challenges that they experience while at school that hinder them from getting that necessary certificate in order to signal to employers that they are employable. So I think we need to shift our thinking, our view of the issue when it comes to youth unemployment and understand that it is a journey. We need to understand the roadblocks that young people experience on their road to their first quality job. And if we can remove those roadblocks, then the likelihood of them being employed is increased, and we don't find ourselves in a situation where we have discouraged job seekers, which adds to the expanded definition of unemployment.
Speaking about the journey, so much time has been spent by experts really speaking about this concept of a skills mismatch. Are you able to break that down for us and help us place its importance in a discussion like this?
Absolutely. So we at Youth Capital recognize the fact that the market demands particular skills, technical skills, but when we think about the education journey that young people follow, they don't acquire the skills that are needed in the market. And most of the skills that are needed in the market are those that you can acquire when you go to a technical college, when you go to a TVET college. But not a lot of young people are encouraged to pursue that path. But not only are they not encouraged, but they're also not supported. So those that do pursue that path, we find that they're not able to get a certificate at the end because they are not connected to workplace-based learning, which is very critical for them to get that certificate. So if young people leave the education system not having necessary skills, then they're not able to enter the labor market. So that mismatch really speaks about what you acquire as a young person when you are going through your education journey versus what is required in the market.
And that's why we find instances where you have a growing number of graduates, quite frankly, in this country who also can't find work. It's almost a sense that the degrees and the ways in which they're taught aren't preparing people for where the needs are insofar as the labor force is concerned. And I guess that's where the organization that you're part of comes in, Unemployed People's Movement. Tell us a bit more about it and where it fits into this discussion.
Unemployed People's Movement is a part of the Assembly of the Unemployed, which is comprised of all the Unemployed People's Movement around the country, including the Unemployed Bachabelo Movement, BAM, in Free State. We also form part of the Cry of the Excluded, that includes unions like SAFTU, AMCU, and other movements, social movements or poor people's movements that you find throughout the country. So Unemployed People's Movement was also formed because of the crisis of the unemployed. Well, it's no longer a question of a crisis. It has become another pandemic. This country is sinking into pandemics. We are we are still in a coronavirus. There comes another pandemic in a form of unemployment, where over 12 million people are unemployed, and that 12.8 exclude the home carers. That's number one. That's a broader definition. In terms of a narrow definition, over 7 million, and in that 7 million, 3.8 million consists of young people between the ages of 18 to 35. So it means they're excluded from society. They have no stake in society. Thus, I'm referring to it as another serious pandemic, the crisis of the unemployed people's movement. It also demonstrates a government that is not accountable. So I think it is only appropriate that we, as the cry of the excluded, we as the assembly of the unemployed, we are calling for the government to resign, because there is no way that you can preside over 44% of the population being unemployed. It means you are not equal to the task. Those people have been pushed into the margins, into the extinctions of society. They are not part of the society. They only count when it comes to vote. They only know that they are citizens when it comes to voting. So the cry of the excluded, the assembly of the unemployed are calling on the government to resign. They are not equal to the task. They cannot continue to preside over pandemics that are killing our people.
Lethiwe, let me bring you back to the discussion. I mean, the sense that we also get is that this unemployment burden is not shared equally. I mean, it almost feels that there are those who carry the brunt of it. I'm thinking specifically, for instance, of entry-level workers, those trying to enter the labor market for the first time, in a context where space for jobs are running out. Typically, employers opt for those with experience to fill those posts, and that automatically leaves, the unemployed entry-level people out, mostly young people.
Absolutely. I mean, just to kind of paint the picture of the group of young people that you are referring to, we know that 9.4 million young people are not in education, employment, or training, right? So these are young people who don't even have the means to enter the labor market. And even if they have some kind of education, the experience trap, what we refer to as the experience trap, hinders them from entering the labor market because they're told that they need many years of experience. And our stance at Youth Capital is that there needs to be a shift that needs to happen in terms of understanding what experience young people bring into the labor market and the experience they can acquire through informal work. We hear a lot that young people are hustling, right? So even though they're not in education, employment, or training, they're doing some hustling on the side. And that experience is providing them with many soft skills that are needed for an entry-level job. And so we're saying that employers need to recognize those skills that young people acquire so that they can get their foot in the door. But until that happens, then young people find themselves constantly knocking, trying to enter the labor market.
And let's speak about the role that unions have to play in, trying to solve this pandemic, as you've put it. I mean, part of what your movement does is have collaborations with organizations, as you've just mentioned, like SAFTU. But in what ways can organized labor help solve this issue in a context where they, too, in some instances, are hamstrung by the socioeconomic constraints of this country?
Well, we think there are. I just want to respond to two things before I get to your question, just to warm up. Number one, the question of skills cannot be seen as a panacea that can solve all the problems of the unemployment, because the unemployment is structural. If you want to deal with the unemployment, you need to consider the question of system change, which bleeds the unemployment. Number two, the question of experience, that the government always talks about the experience or the inexperience of young people. Where do you get an experience when the unemployment is so structural, when the unemployment has reached the levels that you now refer to it as pandemic? So again, the question of the experience is unjustified. That's number one. Number two, referring to your question, we also think as the assembly of the unemployed and the cry of the excluded, the unemployed must receive a basic grant of 1,500 rand per month, because you continue to have needs. Whether you're unemployed or employed, you continue to have needs. I mean, the petrol has just gone up. If the petrol has just gone up and the diesel has just gone up, you're excluding again the unemployed, because it means we don't have the money to go and seek for jobs because the petrols have gone up. That's number one. Number two, we are calling on the government to implement or to enshrine in our constitution the right to work. Because in the constitution, you can have all the other rights, the right to life, the right to dignity. All those rights are meaningless as long as you don't have the right to work. The right to work is so important and so fundamental that all the other rights becomes meaningless. If you don't work, you don't have dignity. If you don't work, your right to work, your right to life has been forfeited. That's why it is so important. We are also calling on the government to insource all the EPWP, the community workers program. All those are in EPWP and CWP programs to be insourced, to be absorbed by these municipalities. We are also calling on the government to say there's a shortage or backlog on housing in this country. Our roads have become carnages because we don't have proper transport, public transport system in this country. So if the government can invest in the housing, in the transport system, you've got the enshrine to work, at least those are the attempts, the part of the million climate jobs, those are the attempts to undermine the unemployment in this country. So all other solutions of the government have been solutions that are underpinned by the neoliberalism. So thus we are calling for a system change, and we are saying we are putting forward the real alternatives that can undermine or address the unemployment in this country.
Got you.
And we are saying
apologies to cut you there, Ayanda. I'm just watching. Apologies for interrupting you. I'm just watching the clock with my one eye, and I can see that Lethiwe, you want to chime in.
Yes, I definitely do want to chime in.
As you do that, in a couple of seconds, speak to me about whether or not you feel government is hearing you as Youth Capital, an organization that's working on policy in the 2.5 years that you've been around.
Thank you so much, Ayanda, for the opportunity. So I want to touch on 2 points that the fellow guest has mentioned. First, with regards to the need for funding for young people that are looking for work. So the basic income grant that he refers to, we support that call because we know that it costs money to look for work. Young people spend over $950, and this is a stat that was put out in 2018. So you can't even imagine what it means right now, in the times that we're living in, for a young person to look for work, how much it now costs for them to look for work. And the fact that it costs so much for young people to look for work adds to them becoming discouraged. It adds to the number of 3.9 million young people being discouraged job seekers because it costs so much to look for work, especially when they come from households where the income is not allowing for them to, use money to buy data. They have to choose between buying data and buying food for the house. So we definitely support the call for basic income grant. And to the point about public works program, what we are saying as Youth Capital is that such programs should give young people meaningful experience firstly, so that when they leave the program, they're able to access future opportunities. Added to that, these programs should allow young people to acquire transferable skills. We hear that, in the first phase of the presidential employment stimulus, over 300,000 young people were given school assistant positions. But those positions should not just, allow young people to work at schools, but also acquire transferable skills.
Right.
And then lastly, to your point about where the government is hearing us, we are definitely making strides. We're breaking ground in getting the ear of officials in government. We put out a report earlier this year around matrics on the fringe, so young people who go through the second chance matric program by the Department of Basic Education, saying, what young people need in order to get through that program and succeed. We also put out another report, and those reports are landing in the hands of officials. So there's still a long way to go, but I know that we do have their attention.
Lethiwe Nkosi is with Youth Capital, the Youth Capital Network, I beg your pardon. She's the mobilizer there. Ayanda Kota is with the Unemployed People's Movement. So both our guests, thanks very much indeed.